Hello, I hope you're having a lovely day today. I am taking you along with my evening routines, and I hesitate to even say routines because it's really just I love spending my evenings in the garden, and that's when it is the least hot outside because our garden gets morning sun, and then by 3 in the afternoon, pretty much most of the garden is then shaded. So I usually start working in the garden from 3 onward, and that's normally when I start figuring out what I'm doing for dinner. I usually have the protein in my mind already prepared, the meat, but any sides I'll just pull from the garden and add it into our meal, which is what I did for today with the beets. Oh, look at you. Are you eating some lettuce I put out for you? Do you want to try this? This was not a hit, and I think it actually scared them because they went back into their cage. Oh. Do you want to try it before I put it in the compost? I don't think you like it. Oh, nope. You don't have to eat it. You keep spitting it out. Is this a game? You know how to get out of there. We are in the process of putting up more conduit pipes for this final row of tomatoes. The ground was just super hard, so Scott needs to get his pole digger out so we can get them in. I'm putting these in the compost. I know that you can probably eat them, but they don't sound good to either of us. Do you want me to bury these?
Put them on top.
So this is where the pile we're adding to, and then Scott will eventually fold it over to this area, and then this is the area that is ready to pull from. Normally we do it in rings. That's how we've done it in the past, but because this is on a hillside, it didn't matter how much we kept leveling it out, it just kept wanting to fall or slide down the hill. So doing it this way has prevented it from sliding. I always save all of our old t-shirts and keep them at the bottom of a rag basket. One, because I can obviously cut them up and use them as rags, but then also for tomato season, I can cut them into strips, and I use them to tie the tomatoes to poles, and because of the stretchy cotton material, it doesn't strangle the stem like if you were to use twine to tie them. It then just naturally decomposes into the ground, so it's not plastic. And this is our simple dinner. It was leftovers with some beets. What you girls doing? You enjoying yourself? I'm gonna grab these.
Oh, hi. Hi, gang.
They look cozy.
They look really cozy.
The chickens are just so cute. We came out from dinner and they were sitting there and it was just adorable. Now I'm going to use those cut up t-shirts and tie the stems to the conduit pipes. I'll show you both our indeterminate and determinate tomatoes, but the indeterminate ones we have strung up with the conduit poles. They're the ones that carry on growing as long as they will, and so we use strings to wrap them up, but some of them I missed a sucker on, like this one, and it got really big. So instead of cutting it off, since it's already so big, I am now just tying it to the pole with the t-shirt that I cut up. And you can kind of see how the t-shirt gives some give with it. That way it's not strangled up against the pole, but it's tight enough for it to be held by it. This is the most cost-effective way we have found to hang up our indeterminate tomatoes. Otherwise, stuff gets really expensive in the garden section, and with the conduit pipes being around $6 each, you only need a few of them and then they'll last forever, whereas tomato cages are not great, especially for indeterminate tomatoes. These are our determinate tomatoes, so they stay as bushes. I don't cut any of the suckers off of these, unlike the indeterminate ones, and so they get very big and messy, and we still have the small tomato cages that we bought for our Kentucky land in 2019, and they are just not great, but that's what we have, so that's what we're using. But these cages are still falling over because the plants are so big. So we have these hoops that we made with the conduit pipes for frost tunnels, and we're obviously not using them right now, so we just lined the bed with those, and that has seemed to help hold up the cages, and we just tied the cages to those posts. And then we've also used the cut up t-shirt to tie the stray stems that have fallen over back up to the cage. I am also cutting away any lower branches that will not produce fruit in order to prevent disease. Back to the indeterminate ones, I am carrying on with putting those to the poles, the ones that have the suckers that have grown, and then you can see how I wrap the tomato plant up the twine, and you really have to stay on top of that. And this is the first year that I have stayed on top of getting the suckers. Normally I let a week go by and then the plants are out of control, whereas this year every evening, it's one of my favorite things to do, so it's not like a chore. I just love doing this. I love looking for the suckers and pruning them, so I have been very diligent with doing that this year, and I've realized that you really can't let a few days go by without checking because the suckers will just get so big. This is the first year we've stayed on top of it, and I do think that's why our tomatoes are so healthy this year. And the ones that I either missed or purposefully let grow, I am just adding string to the top of the conduit pipe and then bringing that down to that sucker so that way it can grow up the string and not flop over in the path. This area, I had spaced our tomatoes out pretty far from each other, which gives room to allow some of these to grow. It works out quite well. We'll be back to the garden later, but another thing that I do pretty much every evening, not every evening because I don't do laundry every day, but the nights or the days that I do laundry, the evenings is when I will take it down from the line. I have my bed sheets and clothes on. I love hanging bed sheets, especially on the line, because the smell of them is just amazing after they've been hanging in the sunshine. And I will normally put them in the dryer, just a quick fluff in case there is any bugs on them before putting them on our bed. And when I went to put them in the dryer, I realized that I had last night's towels that were hanging on the line that I did a quick fluff in the dryer was still in the dryer. I never put them away. And putting the towels in the dryer also helps get rid of that crunchy feeling that they get from hanging on the clothesline. So during the summer, I try to hang all of my clothes outside, pretty much everything I wash outside, because one, it's cost effective, and two, I like the process of doing it. I did a whole video on making a clothesline and all of the different styles of clotheslines. I will link that below if you want inspiration with a clothesline. I direct sowed all of my basil seeds this year, and that was a bad idea because only one of the plants, one of the seeds came up. So I re-sowed them again inside in the grow tent, and so I'm now planting them outside underneath of the tomatoes. The plan with our garden is to always do companion planting and putting things underneath of the tomatoes, so you'll see nasturtiums are under the tomatoes. Everything else that I direct sowed under them didn't take off. It didn't work. We have tons of birds in our garden, and I noticed that they dig everywhere after I plant. So that was a learning lesson, is I really do have to start everything inside, otherwise it just won't grow. And you can see I'm cutting off all of the new starts at the bottom of these indeterminates, or they will start making a whole new tomato plant. And then it is already worm season. We have found hornworms, and then I think these are called army worms, and they will actually eat the tomatoes. Hornworms will just devastate the plant. They usually don't bother the tomatoes, but these little black worms will just eat the tomato even if it's green. So we've been trying to keep an eye out for holes in the leaves, and that's usually where the army worms will be. And then obviously if the plant is completely stripped, then you probably have a hornworm somewhere. This is an onion bed, also a mint bed, also a tomato bed, and this was a lesson learned. My whole onion season was kind of a disaster. I learned a lot this year. I need to get them in the ground much sooner. Do not companion plant onions. Give them their own space. Otherwise, they will be competing for space, and especially the mint. I read that you can plant mint and onions together. Not a good idea, but what did work was the cages. Where we put the hardwire cloth down did prevent vole damage. The lower beds where we did not have hardwire cloth, there was lots and lots of vole damage, but we still got some small onions out of there, and my friend Natasha encouraged me that that is the correct portion size of onions anyways, and they will store much longer than huge onions. So there's always a positive in everything. I have just picked probably about a third of our beets, and I didn't even know this was in the garden, but this is the biggest beet I have ever grown in my entire life, and even this one is huge. Our onions did not do good, but the beets did beautifully. Here is a wide look of our tomatoes. That has been obviously my main focus of this garden season. I want lots of pasta sauce, salsa, ketchup, so we have over 100 tomato plants growing in our garden, and I am still praying that they keep growing good and strong. This front row is cherry tomatoes, and they are already so big they've reached the top of the pole, so we're gonna have to start turning them sideways to go along the pole sideways. But I have a question for you all. I have tried looking on the internet and nothing comes up about this, but several of my varieties of tomatoes have suckers or new starts coming out of the middle of the branch. And I have never seen this before. It is the branches that are the lower ones that I'll normally prune off at the bottom. So it's not a sucker branch, it's just the lower branch. And you can see these big starts coming off of them. And I thought maybe it's just a certain variety, but all of my indeterminate varieties, besides even the big tomatoes are doing it, have starts coming off of the branches, which is very fascinating to me. I've never seen that before. Maybe that's normal and I've just never had healthy tomato plants, but I've never seen that before. And then obviously the stems that have the tomatoes on them, those are also growing into a full plant. So I'm having to string those up as well.
Go inside and see your friend, big girl.